TDC meeting. We will go through the customary welcome and introductions. My name is Tom Hermanson, Chair with Ocean Partners Hospitality.
Peter Kranis with the Tourism Development Office.
Bob Medina, by now everyone should know.
And make sure you're
The greatest city on the face of the earth.
make sure you're on green.
As you were.
Julie?
Julie Braga, General Manager of the Residence in Melbourne.
I'm Andrea Young, West Melbourne City Council. Forgot Mr. Lober.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, not a worry.
Oh, my God.
Not a worry. I know I'm so small and insignificant here. Brian Lober, Commissioner of the greatest district in Brevard County. Not to take anything away from the greatest
Wow,
city
thank
in
you.
Brevard County.
Christine Shavaric from the County Attorney's Office.
Brian Blanchard, TDO.
Deborah Webster, TDO.
Charity Stewart, TDO.
In the back, behind Charity, could you introduce yourself, please? Hi, Katie.
Bob Boswell, Warbird Air Museum.
Bob and Norm. Okay, and we have Mike.
Mike McGarry, Brevard County Natural Resources.
Jeff. And we have
John Belden with 3-2 List Off Tourism Podcast.
And that takes care of everyone. We have Giles Malone on Zoom call. Anybody else on Zoom? We have Kathy, can't see your full last name, Andron, thank you, and Tom Bartasek, and somebody calling in from 4226.
Bonnie King.
Bonnie King. Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of that. We, before we approve the agenda, I've been asked to entertain a motion to allow Giles Malone to vote via Zoom call.
So moved, Lober.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, as is customary, we would ask any member of the TDC to declare any conflict of interest with any business coming before the board today. Hearing none, we will move on to approval of the TDC agenda, TDC council minutes from July 28th.
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Young. Second, any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, we'll vote to approve those. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. And thank you. I'm somehow managed to skip B. A motion to approve the agenda is presented unless anybody has any requests for additions or comments.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Young.
Second.
Second from Mr. Winston. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, agenda passes. Thank you very much. We'll move to Director's Report. Peter.
Very good. So just a couple of things in the report today, and then I want to talk on item D a little bit in more length, but just some top line. June, as you know, was another record month. Our tracking now from March to June is beating 2019 numbers, so we're basically tracking now on the best window of time we've had for spring and summer. I believe July will follow suit. In fact, I think July will break 2 million, which is the first time it has ever broken 2 million. So I think we're going to just have basically a stellar summer, and then we'll see what the fall does. We've seen in STR numbers, the weeklies drop off the last couple of weeks. That's not atypical when, school goes back in session. Usually there's a little drop off. And then that kind of continues into September, which September is usually our lowest month. So, I think that nothing will change with that, but, I don't think it will be anything below what I would consider, a normal year, like an 18 or a 19. I think we'll see the year end with August and September probably at or slightly above 2019 levels, which means that we are right now on track to beat our total 2019 fiscal, which was 16.023 million. I think we're going to land somewhere between 16.2 and 16.4 million when we finish September. So we'll know that later in the fall. It'll usually by the end of October, beginning of November. So we'll track on that and see where that goes. I didn't have anything budget-wise. Budget looks normal. We're on track with spending. So unless there are any questions, I will.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
We've seen similar things at the zoo, but we started hitting records in May. So it sounds like the hotel accommodations actually beat the attractions accommodations in terms of when the pattern hit. I thought that was interesting.
Beginning in March was when we began to really see that uptick. March of this year did not beat March of 19, but obviously, then we got into April, May, June, and they were beating 19 numbers in aggregate. So yes. Okay. That being said, just to talk a little bit about our office space. So it came to our attention a couple of months ago that the building that we're in Cocoa Village the ownership is looking to sell that building. Our lease goes through June of 22, but we don't want to wait till the end of the lease to try to figure out what we're going to do. So we started looking at various options, one of which would be to renew the lease, but because they're looking to sell, they're asking for a lot of out clauses, if you will, which could potentially leave us with a very short window of time to do anything about it. And I thought, ignorantly, I thought office space was going to be, readily available. We engaged with Lytle Beckner Robison, that, has a lot of insight into that world, and they shared with us that it's actually the opposite, that businesses, I thought because of COVID, maybe a lot of businesses would be abandoning space, but it's the reverse. There are a lot of businesses now looking for space, and so space is actually at a premium in Brevard County right now. So we challenged them. We said, look, we're paying a little over about $16.50 a square foot. Look at things under $20 and see what's out there. Brian and Charity and I and Candace, we did a little tour, and most of the spaces in Melbourne are at or above 20. Vieira is, as you can imagine, skyrocketed 24, 26 and above. There's some new buildings going up. All the new buildings are starting in the 24, 25 range. Really not, I thought there would be more options, but frankly there weren't. However, there was a space out in Cocoa Beach, those of you may be familiar with. It is where the Sun Trust is located. It's a 4-story building. And it's right on the corner of A1A and Cocoa Isles Boulevard. If you're heading southbound on A1A, it's right before the A1A splits. So it sits between Minuteman and 520, which is obviously a key tourism corridor. They have a floor of the building that's available. It would meet all our needs. It's about 5,500 square feet. We're in a little bit more than that now, but I'll talk about the visitor center in a second, but we would just need office space. We wouldn't need the visitor center space. So that would not only accomplish our needs, but also it has a big enough space that we could actually host these meetings and all of our committee meetings, which there's probably about 30 to 35 committee meetings that occur throughout the year. So it would allow us to host these meetings and our committee meetings on location. So if you look around the room, we have 4 or 5 staff that are here. typically, every committee meeting, we have 4 or 5 staff that have to drive here to the government center or wherever we're having our meetings. So it takes a lot of time and takes people out of their office environment, and it would be a big cost savings, I think, to have meetings on property. If you look at page 58 in your packet, I did a little spreadsheet just to do an analysis to show what the costs would be versus where we are now. And I split out the visitor center, and like I said, I'll address the visitor center in a second, but I just want to talk about the office space for a second. So if you look at our actual office space, we're currently in about 5,700. This new space would be just under 5,600. The current office space, we're at 1,632, that's all in. So that has all the CAM and et cetera, all the other things that they add. The SunTrust building would be a little over 1851, all in again, with all the CAM and everything included. So it's a little more expensive, but like I said, I think from a long-term perspective, it would allow us to sign a long-term deal. They would be helping us with some of the construction that's needed, but really most of it is already intact. I mean, it's Class A office space, so it's already sort of configured, well for us. So we have to probably build an office or two, but for the most part, it'll be move-in ready pretty quickly. So that's the office piece of it. And then looking at the visitor center, we're right now about 400 square feet of our office is devoted to the visitor center that fronts Brevard Avenue and Cocoa. In spite of being right downtown, and I'm not just talking about this past year, which obviously there were a lot of limitations on traffic in that area, but even going back to 2018, 2019, our traffic is, it's okay, but it's really not that great. We went out and looked and found a space on the corner of 520 and it's a side street, but it's about a block off of A1A. If you know where the Starbucks is on 520 there out by the beach, it's right next to that in a little strip center. And they had 800 square feet that they were willing to lease us for just a touch more than what we're paying now. And Brian and I went on the day we went, there was a ton of traffic, obviously a lot of drive traffic, but there's also a lot of people walking by because there's restaurants and other things in that strip center. So we think we'd get probably double, if not more than double the traffic that we're currently getting. So I think that would be our thought would be to try to move the visitor center into that space so that now we're really going to be where tourists are and serving them. And I mean, I think that's our mission when it comes to the visitor center, is to try to serve as many people as possible. So that being said, that is also our suggestion. We are, obviously pending the TDC's perspective on this. We will also then bring it to the county commission and let them weigh in on it. But, our hope and our recommendation would be to move both our office and our visitor center to the respective locations as soon as we could negotiate a lease. I mean, we'll still have to go into negotiations with them and finalize everything, but I mean, I wouldn't think that it would take that long to do. We could probably move as early as November 1st is kind of our estimate at this point. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll open it up for questions, and then we can see where everybody is.
Peter, a couple questions for you, and I'm not trying to shoot it down at all. I really am not trying to do that. In fact, I think from a visitor center standpoint, it sounds at least logically like a better location anyway.
Right.
My concern, not with respect to the visitor center, but with respect to the office side of it, and more specifically toward meetings like this, I don't know the answer, and I'm not trying to suggest or hint anything. I wonder if we would have more or less of the public attending if we had it in Cocoa Beach versus here. That's a concern. I don't know if it's better or worse over there. I just think it's something that we ought to factor in. The other concern that I have, and I say this because I've been part of different boards and committees that frankly are great with this and some that are not so great with this, including one that I'm on now out in Orlando, parking. Not just for us, but also for the public, but really both. And I have no issue with elected officials driving to see staff, because frankly, we're salaried. Some of you are hourly, but the bottom line is I much rather see us in the car than having department directors and staff in the car reporting mileage, which has a taxpayer cost, directly, indirectly, or otherwise, or both. But what is the parking situation out there? I just don't want to get into a situation where we have a problem that's foreseeable.
Yeah, it's actually very good. I would say the building is maybe right now is 50% occupied. So we would take an entire floor, so it would probably end up being like 3/4 occupied with us in it. But they also have smaller buildings outside of the 4-story building, and there's parking 360 degrees almost completely around that, and it looks like there's a lot of available spots. Every time we've gone, Brian and I have gone out there probably half a dozen times, there's always been 30, 40 spots available. So
There's a post office right across the street as well.
Oh, that's where it is then.
Across the street.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a general
behind it,
thought.
Behind it.
Yeah.
And I'll defer to staff largely with respect to this, because this is something where, truly you all are going to be the ones doing this day in and day out, not us. We're going to be doing this on a recurring basis, but nowhere near as much as you are. The one thing I would ask, if this is something that goes through, please just be mindful if we have a couple meetings there and we have 2 people show up in the audience, even if we have the office space, it may be better to meet here in the government center or at some other location, whether it's at the zoo as we've done in the past, something more or less on the mainland. I'm happy to drive anywhere. Anywhere in the county, but if it's something where we find that the public just stops attending.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we knew, well, 2 things. One is I think if we knew there were topics that would maybe generate a lot of potential public, we'd probably still want to meet here or at the zoo or somewhere where that had a bigger, availability for audience. But yeah, I think certainly for TDC meetings, we'd probably be more hypersensitive to, is it inconvenient for people or not. I don't know if I have a specific thought on that, other than
I think
we don't normally have more than a dozen people in any given time, but you know.
It's rare that we ever see more than a dozen people. Dave's steady; he's always here. And frankly,
Dave, how's that drive for you? Is that okay?
And frankly, at the committee meetings, it's really rare if you get. We had nobody here but Dave at our Capitol Facilities meeting a few days ago. So at least from
committee
even
side,
if you have
yeah.
TDC meetings in this room going forward, you still be well covered.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I did want to also mention Giles had mentioned to me that they were looking potentially to do something with the exploration tower out at the port, and we spoke with them, and unfortunately they're going through a lawsuit right now. They had major water intrusion, and until they settle that suit and then repair the damage that was done, that building is not available, and it could be that way for quite some time. So that wasn't an option to look at. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Keith?
Just to get it on the record, I'm assuming, I'm assuming that there is either not Brevard County government space available, or it's not desirable space.
Yeah.
Just so everyone knows.
Yeah,
it's
thanks
not
for
like
the-
you could come in here for free.
No,
right?
no, thanks for the question. That was my first question of county management was, is there any available space? Commissioner Lober knows we did, at one point, we were looking at space at the Merritt Island Annex, but then that got quickly absorbed by a few different organizations. But other than that, there was no other space available either here in Viera or at any other government building across the county. So, but just I don't know if
From
you
a
want to-
visitor center standpoint too, my office, it's a great location, but not for visitors.
So 2 things. Julie, go ahead. So 2 things. First, I want to commend staff for their diligence and understanding the fact that the lease opportunities today, they just keep rising, right?
Yeah.
Property is scarce. So I just want to commend that opportunity that you guys secured a location, in particular with the Veterans Center. I think it's great to have something like that there. However, I want to echo Commissioner Brian Lober's concerns. I would prefer to have meetings here, centrally located. Even though we may have just a dozen folks that come in, it's just the fact that it's a lot more convenience to come in from throughout. So the property, I'm in agreement with, because you were able to negotiate that kind of lease agreement. So those are my concerns. Are not only, I think the parking is sufficient out there. I know exactly the location you're referring to.
Right.
But the meetings are a concern for me. I would prefer they be in a central location here within our community or in Viera.
Thank you, sir. And I could say, I mean, I think, Tom's thought is probably good. We could probably keep the TDC here and then, make judgment calls about committee meetings. But I think, if we could at least have the committee meetings there, that would save a lot of staff time and a lot of mileage for us going back and forth. And I think it would save the county money at the end of the day if we could do that portion of it. Because we have 5 committees. They average 5 or 6 meetings a year. TDC, we have 10 meetings a year. I think we could keep those here, and I think we would be in good shape if that worked for everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I have 2 questions. Well, first, I just want to comment. I think we're very fortunate in our traffic situation that when I tell my peers in South Florida that it takes me 15 minutes to get someplace, they echo how ridiculous it is that I'm even complaining about this. So I think from a standpoint of getting out and seeing our community, I don't really have an issue with where the location is. It is still pretty central from that standpoint, and easy to get to. If it was farther north into Cocoa Beach and you get into the traffic a little bit more, I think it does prevent some of the South County from getting there. But
Yeah.
going over Pineda and heading over, it wouldn't take very much longer for me personally. But the other thing I just have a question about is with separating the visitor center space from the office space, does that create additional staffing needs and costs?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. So we have, right now, we have designated 1.5 FTE for the Visitor Information Center. I believe we could keep the hours condensed during the week and actually expand. Right now, we're not open on the weekends. We're only open during our normal office hours. Frankly, when you think about a visitor center, that doesn't make any sense. We should probably be open from 12 to 5 or 6 p.m. weekdays, and then on the weekend, maybe from 10 to 4, 10 to 5, or something like that. So we should probably change our hours anyway if we were in a normal high-traffic tourism area. And I think our 1.5 FTE would be plenty to cover that. We have not had the half a person. We have not had that part-time person filled at this point because we just hadn't needed it with COVID and everything going on. So now would be a great time. If we did move, we would probably look at, getting the half person. The full-time person that's currently handling our visitor center, she's going to be retiring at the end of this year. So that would offer us the opportunity to maybe hire somebody that had flexibility to work weekends. So I don't think we'll need to add anything, but I think we will have maybe some different staff hours than what we have today, because it doesn't really, it lines up with our office, but it doesn't line up with when tourists are, needing to access us, so.
Along those lines, Peter, I'm assuming you looked at this. Why are you doing this visitor center? I mean, from a tourism experience point of view, if you're not open most hours, people lose interest and walk away. And are there better options, like someone who's at a desk who answers a chat line or answers a phone, and don't rent the space and save the money, put it into people who are open, who are covering more hours and are available for a phone call or something else? Because I can't imagine, again, I get super frustrated, and I can just tell you from operations point of view. When you're not open on weekends, you're not open most hours, people just move on to the next media because they can't. So have you asked the question about?
Yeah,
is it
we
worth
have, and
doing?
I had a lot of experience with visitor centers in Orlando, and I always bounce back and forth with, do people really want to come in somewhere and talk with somebody in person? And the answer to that is there's still enough of the population that does know what a visitor center is. They know what that circle I stands for. International visitors are very interested in visitor centers. They often use them for not just planning their trip, but they actually even look for lodging input from it. The person that does staff the visitor center does answer all of the online questions. One of the things we want to do is we want to add a chat to our website, and the thought would be that person would do that as well. So we really would have all visitor questions, visitor services, functions kind of consolidated. But I think my takeaway is right now I do believe that there is an interest. There's enough of an interest in a visitor center to continue staffing it. Right now, it is part of it's part of the state statute, but it's also part of our county ordinance that 2% of the total TDT collection goes towards operating a visitor center. So I don't feel like at this point I would recommend changing that. I think there's still a need for it. And I think putting it more front and center in the middle of a tourism corridor like A1A and 520 is going to get us a lot more bang for the buck, and we'll serve a lot more people. We'll be able to expand our hours to the weekends, because I agree with you. If you're not open Sundays, that's an iffy day, but Saturday you should at least be open Saturday. So we'd like to do that.
I would say Sunday, and that's why I was just thinking whether you'd get more bang for your buck with a virtual visitor center that's open 12 hours a day with a live chat. But I'll let you figure out. But
yeah, I mean, we could, one of the things we can look at is technology as well, and see if there are some, 24/7 type functionality that we could have, but certainly having normal hours, regular hours for a visitor type of situation, I think we could figure that out.
Mr. Chair, Giles has his hand raised in the chat, so I think he wants to chime in.
Giles.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, what do you calculate the total cost to be of the Visitors Information Center on an annual basis, including staff and utilities and this rent, et cetera, because just sort of a thought is, we have this ongoing sort of partnership with the chambers where we give the chambers money every year to support them. And
yes, sir.
Cocoa Beach Chamber has a location in Vieira. They have a location in Cocoa Beach, I think.
Actually,
and the other
they don't have Vieira anymore. They left Vieira.
Well, just a thought. I mean, they have staff there. Of course, they represent their particular area, but you could have a display for the Space Coast in each one of those offices, with necessary collateral information and so on. If we worked out an arrangement with them, like to Keith's point, what's the total cost, I guess, of the VIC for the year?
Yeah, so there's two numbers. The 2% generates about $250,000, about $250,000. About $100,000 of that goes towards the chamber grants, if you will, as you mentioned. So Palm Bay, Melbourne, Cocoa Beach, and Titusville chambers all received $25,000 grants out of those funds. About $50,000-ish, maybe a little bit more, goes towards website and technology that we use to answer visitor questions, kind of electronic servicing.
995 Visitor Center?
We do pay for some distribution of brochures, and not only on 95, but Turnpike and in Orlando. That's about another 80,000 or so. And then the rest is staff costs, and then this would be, you could see the rent would be about $14,000 a year. running up to a little bit more than that over the course of it, but starting out at about 14,000. So, there's, obviously, we pay for the staffing and their benefits. That comes out of that money as well. So.
Right, but if we didn't do this center, I'm trying to figure out what the savings would be. If we didn't have this rent, we didn't have the staff, I understand about the 2% and all that, but I'm just saying if we're able to use that money for something else. Because
I want to say it's about 60, 70,000 that we would probably save, something in that neighborhood. It would certainly be south of 100,000.
Okay. And my second part of my question is, so the Visitors Information Center that you're proposing, is that in the White Rose Shopping Center?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Is it towards the sort of the Starbucks end of that center, or is it towards the east end?
It's more in this, it's right in the middle, so it's kind of, I believe there's a hair salon, there's a restaurant on one side of it, and then MedFast on the other side, right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a busier spot, that's for sure. There's a lot of traffic in there.
I mean, the day we were there, I mean, there was just constant, coming and going of people, many of whom looked touristy. So.
No, I think,
White shorts on.
I think we can.
So I guess if we're talking about $70,000 a year spending on that center there in Cocoa Beach. I mean, is it possible to come up with an approximate number of people that we think will walk in the store? That way we can kind of come up with a per cap, cost. I mean, if it's 5,000 people a year and it's costing us $70,000, then, you're looking at $12 per person, aren't you? So I'm just kind of curious as to whether it's really viable to do this at all.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I know our current volume is not very high, and I would think this would be,
This is on the north side of 520?
It's on the north side of
Cross
520.
520 from the dinosaur store.
Right.
So I'm going to,
Or Nolan's
weigh
Pub.
in from everything I know about fast food, which is not much, but whenever you talk to fast food,
And then the mic.
whenever you talk to fast food practitioners, they tell you what most matters is the flow on the corner, and that's the wrong side if you're heading into Cocoa Beach, right? That's the side you're heading away from Cocoa Beach. If you're heading into Cocoa Beach, you're much more likely, I would think, to stop at a tourist destination. Again, they would just tell you the corners matter. You'd have to turn left and go back and out. It's when people are heading away from the beach on 520. So it's just something to consider
So
on
there's
traffic flow.
Two lights there.
Yeah.
Try to get a quarter in Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral, you'll spend $2 million.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not the
from a
direction you'd
visitor's-
prefer.
I mean, you can't compare what we're trying to do here to a Wawa, it's not the same
But I
thing.
would say the
There are two
Starbucks
lights there.
Starbucks effect says that that's not true. 'Cause
There
there's
is a
there.
Starbucks between the beach and this place.
Yeah, it's a
I
Target.
think that whether or not we have a visitor center is a valid one.
Yeah.
My one thought would be on both of these leases is to sign 5-year leases with 5-year options, which is a negotiable point that I'm sure, if they have vacant space, they'll be willing to do without necessarily seeing any rent increase.
Yeah.
So that if you don't see the traffic, then you're not committed to a 10-year lease.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
That was
answer is to
That was the thought, was as 5 and 5, and I was even thinking, knowing that maybe in a year or 2 or 3 years down the road, if visitor centers are no longer viable and we find that we're not getting traffic that's worthy of us continuing, then, we'd have some kind of opt-out clause, because I do think ultimately the consumer is changing, the way they are getting information is changing, and it might be an obsolete thing down the road. I don't think that's today, but I do think it could happen, in 3, 4, 5 years, so I'd want to be able to get out of any lease for sure.
So your current negotiations for both of these leases has been
5.
5 and 5?
Yeah. Again, we haven't signed anything or put anything in writing other than intent letters, but.
Commissioner Olberg.
I mean, based on my experience with these sorts of things, I mean, the numbers of people coming in and out are pretty small. Like you said, people getting their information digitally and so on. So if we had 5,000 people a year, we're looking at a $12 plus cost per person, which is high. And then over 5 years, if it's $70,000 a year, you're talking about $350,000 that we're going to spend where we could spend it on something that will give us a better return. So I do question even the viability of a visitors information center just because of those factors I just mentioned.
I'm not intending to steer us into a whole different can of worms, but I'm familiar with both locations. Where we are now is solidly in my district. Actually, it's not far from my house. Where you're talking about solidly in my district, I wouldn't want to walk it from my house in the middle of the summer, but I guess if someone put a gun to my head, I could. My question, and I don't know that we necessarily can do anything differently or substantially different enough from what the other businesses there are already doing to really make a difference, but the visibility to me is really key, and what we can do in terms of signage is really key. Because you've got an excellent location. I mean, if you want to look where you are in the scheme of where traffic flows, as far as what you're talking about in Cocoa Beach, there is a ton of traffic that goes by that. An absolute
Something like
ton.
the car count is like 20,000 a day or something crazy.
I'm not
yeah.
surprised it's that high. But I just wonder, I mean, is the thought process that folks are going to go there because they intend to go there and they intended to go there before they saw signage, or are we thinking more that folks are going to be in the area doing touristy things, looking stereotypically touristy?
Right.
They're going to see something and then say, oh, gee, why don't I go in?
Yeah.
Because if we can do something to increase the visibility, that's great. I don't know at that point what the sign codes are for the city of Cocoa, I should say Cocoa Beach, excuse me. Whether there's some opportunity to take up more real estate on the existing sign, especially if he has, or he or she has additional suites that aren't being rented, at least until the time they are rented.
Right.
But I think if we can do something to increase the visibility, it would probably make the value factor increase as far as keeping the visitor information center open, because then you're going to get more people that drive by and say, oh, gee, that's nice, I'll go there. I might do it myself if I were visiting somewhere.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good point. I think visitor centers are not, unless you're at a major exit of a highway, you're not really a destination. So like the Visit Florida has a, right when you cross from Georgia into Florida, they have a major visitor center off of 95. So that's kind of a logical place for a visitor center. People typically, many thousands and tens of thousands of cars stop there.
And orange juice.
And they serve orange juice, which is something we could look at, or cookies or something. But yeah, to your point, Commissioner, yes, I think signage would be important. There are two signage opportunities right now that I know of. One is right above the actual door itself. So above it is a big, broad overhang. So you could put a big sign up there, which we would be allowed to do. And then they have a large, kind of sandwich board sign that's pretty large. And to your point about maybe getting them to give us extra space because there's other empty places, maybe they'd give us a little bit more. And then we could always, one of the other things is when you have an official visitor center, since we're county, we could get FDOT to do the blue signs. So they will actually put up signs for you that we would have, I would ask them to put it on A1A, 520, the roads that they control, which are all major arteries, we could get them to do that. So that's another way that would be sort of a wayfinding to it. But yeah, I think typically a visitor center that's in a municipality like that, it's not necessarily the destination, but it's certainly oh, hey, look what's here, let's go take a look and maybe we can get some information. And I think we would serve, my guess would be, Giles, probably more than 5,000. I could see us doing easily a couple of thousand a month because, you think about June, July, August, huge months like that, March, March is a huge month. I think we'd get a lot of people coming in if we had signage that promoted the boat races and signage that promoted the air shows and things that are occurring right in that area. I think people would come in just because they'd be interested in learning about those types of things. So I think we'd have an opportunity for a lot more people than 5.
The Visitors Bureau for the Cocoa Beach Chamber had a visitor center for years up in Cape Canaveral in a small strip mall that you can blink and pass. And we used to get a surprising amount of business for our various hotels out of that sort of very poorly located hotel. And here you're in a pedestrian core in Cocoa Beach, with the vast majority of visitors are going to be walking around in that area, because you're certainly not walking around in Cape Canaveral. So, and then to Giles's math, I agree, that's how I would think about it too, but just to point out that Peter did say that they're not going to increase their full-time equivalents. These are employees that they otherwise, staff has had on board, 1.5 FTEs to answer calls and do other work, which they could also do, just off-site in the center. So what we're really looking at here is a small increase in office rent, and then a, $15-ish thousand a year increase in a visitor center rent, putting the visitor center in an area that has vastly improved visibility and walkability than where it's currently been in tucked away at the end of Brevard Avenue in Cocoa Village. So if there's aren't any other comments, maybe somebody would like to make a motion.
I'll motion to approve the proposed space in the visitor center as recommended by TDO staff, with the condition that we'll reevaluate, and if we're not getting the foot traffic, that we know we're going to look for other options. That's what made me feel comfortable.
I'll second that with that option to include that buyout option, that we're not committed to those 5 years.
Yeah, I agree.
If you agree with
I agree.
that, man.
It makes me feel comfortable.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I mean, as a landlord, that's one of those deal breakers. You want to, you obviously give a term and an option. The shorter the term, the higher the rate. 5 years is pretty much at the low end, depending on the tenant improvements that they're giving, which isn't mentioned here. But if the landlord, who I know the landlord is an attorney and doesn't give much away, and I know people that have rented there.
Well, so along that same vein, though, sir, what I'm referring to is that visitor center. If we get that foot traffic that we're not expecting, have that opportunity to go a different way.
Yeah. So you're asking a termination clause in a lease. Is that what you're referring to inside the 5-year term? That's obviously a give and take in lease negotiation. So Peter can ask,
Yeah.
to see if you can get a termination clause, but that just makes it a shorter lease term. The response is probably going to be a higher square foot rent or no tenant improvements or something else.
Or maybe a buyout of a month or two rent or something like, there could be a buyout option. I'll look at all of those.
Okay, thank you.
Are you fine with that,
Yes,
Ms.
I'm
June?
absolutely fine, thank you.
Then I'll second that.
Mr. Chair, and I'll support that if that's what the TDC as a whole is inclined to do. But maybe it's worth considering rephrasing the motion to authorize staff to negotiate with the property owner or whoever they've delegated that authority to research which concessions may be available in accordance with the discussion that we've had today. So whether it's getting additional signage space until such time as the suites are rented and it's no longer available, whether it's getting that termination clause built in. I would be more comfortable with that, but if you all as a board want to go in the direction that was originally contemplated, I'll support that as well.
That is what I implied by having the TDO staff negotiate that. I feel comfortable with
I'll support
giving
that.
them the direction, and that was what the motion intended, at least that's from my perspective, and then just with the importance on that we all agree that they need to have that ability to pull out if needed, if it doesn't work.
Perfect, thank you.
I think we have a motion.
Yes, sir.
Yep. And a second from Mayor Medina. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion
Giles
passes.
votes affirmative.
I think that was an affirmative.
Okay.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And then, so that's the VIC and then the office space, Mr. Chair?
Oh, I thought we took them both.
I included both.
Oh, you did?
I think we
Okay,
did
I'm
both.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
I misunderstood. Okay. But just to clarify, no termination clause on the office space, because obviously that would
No.
be very
That is
costly.
correct. There was towards the
No.
visitor center.
Okay.
Yes,
The
sir.
only
Thank
risk,
you.
I think the only risk is the visitor center.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good discussion, good points from everybody, appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I just have one more thing I just wanted to point out in the packet on pages 59 through 67. I started working, the county had requested several departments work on a strategic plan. Ours department was not requested to do it, but I felt like it's always prudent to have one. I started working on just a 3-year. My experience with strategic plans is anything longer than 3, and they become obsolete pretty quickly. So I just wanted to, have one that we could go back and look at and update from time to time. But I've just put a draft here in the packet for people to look at. It's not finalized. There's a couple of sections that still need some work. But I figured since we were submitting our budget last time, and that'll be going to the board in September, I figured it'd be good to have a strategic plan that we could then kind of connect those things together. So that's just for review and future discussion. We can put it on a future TDC meeting to talk about. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is we had 4 items yesterday on the county commission, all on consent, and all 4 passed. They were the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge extension to their grant project, all the IRL grants, the marketing plan, and oh my God, and the major event grant guidelines. Those were all approved yesterday. So thank you.
Were they all approved under consent?
They were all approved under consent. The Merritt Island Wildlife had a no discussion, but a no vote from District 3.
Was that Kurt's district?
Commissioner Tobias.
Tobias. Thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it. Our esteemed chairman, Mr. Bacher, unfortunately is taken ill with COVID, so he's not here today. But he's better. He's good. He's fine. Take more than COVID to take that guy down, I can tell you that. I think he kicked COVID's ass. Excuse me.
You talking about Chuck Norris or Bob?
Yeah, seriously. So I think we'll hand it off to Charity to give us a marketing update.
Thank you. Brian, can you pull my slides up for me, please? I have a very brief marketing update today. We did not have marketing committee in August, so I'm going to cover for you some highlights of the summer, and then in the subsequent TDC meetings, we'll do a full deep dive of all of the summer metrics from the summer campaign once we have those reports in. So first slide, please. So a couple updates from this month. Our current summer campaign does continue through September 6th. Cruise messages were integrated into the video spots and all applicable display ads. We did also show those to the port, so they've seen them and are aware of what our consumer-facing return to cruising messaging has been. So they were very grateful to see that information. As I just mentioned, a full recap of the summer campaign performance metrics will be given in the next couple of meetings as we have all of the metrics in-house. Fall planning is underway. It's hard to believe next week is September already. These plans will be discussed in more detail at the next marketing committee meeting, which is September the 14th. And then, as Peter mentioned, the marketing plan was approved yesterday at the commission meeting. So we're moving full steam ahead with that information. So here are some of the summer paid campaign highlights I wanted to share with you. Right now, our average return on investment for spend to date in the summer campaign is approximately $50 to every $1 spent. And as we look at the month-over-month results through the summer, they have increased. We attribute this to a combination of things. We've brought in a couple of new vendors. We have obviously a higher monthly spend than we did in the spring, and then also working on those optimizing for those valued conversions that we've been talking about. We've also seen on some of the platforms the cost of those conversions come down. So we're converting at a higher rate for a lesser cost, which is excellent. That's what we want to continue to see. 100% of our core digital advertising vendors are now able to track either hotel bookings, arrival in market, or consumer spending. So as we're continuing to work towards really understanding every dollar that we spend, what is it doing, it's great to see that we've got this suite of core vendors that we can look at. Either did they see an ad and book a hotel, did they see an ad and then their cell phone arrived here in market, or we know that they came into market after they saw an ad, and we'll get some of that spending data. And we'll go through, again, these metrics for the entire campaign in the next month or two. I wanted to share a really interesting stat with you. One of the things that we're always looking at is engagement with brands. When you think about in a day how many messages you see from brands, one of the goals of our campaigns are, can we get you to stop and spend a few seconds with our brand, right? Watch that video, comment on a post. So when we designed the Pandora branded station, the Space Coast Tunes station, one of the things we were looking for is, are you spending time with our brand? And in July, an average of 24 minutes of listening time is happening on our Space Coast station. And that's, for spending time with a brand, that's a huge amount of time. And what's great about it is because they're on our station, they're getting an ad from us every couple of songs, plus the banners are showing. So in that time period, it's just a great way that we've curated this list of music and we've become very memorable to them, and they've shown us that they appreciate that by spending time with us. We've asked our agency how that has looked compared to some of the other campaigns that they have done, and this is the most listening time on average of the campaigns they've done. So we'll dig a little bit more into that, but it was really great to see that people have responded really well to it.
Who creates the playlist? Is that something Pandora does for us, or you guys do it?
So we, between the office and our social media fans, we curated the list.
Wow.
And then we sent it to Pandora. We obviously made sure that it was family friendly, and that we pulled out anything that was not appropriate to our audience. But that's how, so we worked together with our fans and said, hey, when you think of the Space Coast, what are some songs you think of? And it's a really cool eclectic mix.
So Keith, my desire to always be a radio DJ, I was able to add about 50 songs that I really loved. Of course, they took a few of them out because they weren't appropriate, but other than that, yes,
I would love to see the playlist.
Yeah, I'm happy to share you. I'll share the original playlist and then the actual.
And what made it?
That is really cool stuff.
Do we have Astronaut in the Ocean by Masked Wolf?
Ooh, I don't think
we need
so,
to
but
add that.
I will go look. All right.
It's a really good song.
I will look. We hope to keep this for the fall, and we'll revise some of those songs for the seasonality behind it. So, but it is this really great mixture of music. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's really neat just to see again that we've been able to capture somebody's attention for so long.
I think the success of it, honestly, it surprised me a little bit. In terms of how long people are actually engaging with it, because I never would have thought that something that was curated by a brand, not, this is not just a radio station that somebody's tuning into. Right. This is somebody has to find it and then actually engage with it, and they're staying 24 minutes. It's pretty incredible. So I'm hoping that not only will we keep it for the fall, but I'm actually hoping long-term we'll just keep it and it'll be our radio station, and we can reprogram, we can add songs, we can, maybe we can add other things to it as well, maybe podcasts, other things. So, but it's an interesting tactic that really kind of worked out well.
Because it's connecting a lifestyle.
Correct.
As opposed to marketing.
Correct.
That's the whole thing, is it's reinforcing a lifestyle. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's correct.
The ads that you're placing, what are the tenor of those? Are they hard sells, or are they?
So they are in that vein of, this is what you experience when you come to Cocoa Beach or Melbourne and the beaches, and then start planning your vacation or explore your vacation at, and the call to action is the website.
Love it. I got to check it out.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And I don't know if I want to bounce this to Charity or to Peter, but whomever feels so inclined. With this in mind, do we have any idea in terms of how much of a lag exists, whether there's an average or even for a portion of the listeners between them listening to this and then turning around and booking, or alternatively listening to this and then coming over here and spending money?
So Pandora is one of the areas that we're still looking at the ways to be able to connect listener behavior to an in-market arrival. We have not seen all of their reporting yet, and which tools we have we might be able to connect some of that story to.
Okay.
But we do have, as an overall, through some of our other metrics, some data on exposure to ads and time to book, to time to arrival within the destination.
Yeah, this just seems to be kind of its own thing to such a degree. I just wonder if this is something where people start listening and then subliminally it kind of floats in there and they say, oh, it must go to Brevard.
They just start driving, and before you know it, they're here.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because everything else we're doing digitally does have some kind of tracking mechanism. So I think we can challenge. I mean, now that we've seen the success, I think Pandora would want to partner with us to try to come up with that answer, because think about what that would mean for other destinations and other products. They might, that might be something that they use as a case study to say, hey, we can, we create these branded stations, and all of a sudden it just creates an audience.
So, you want to make your visitor center work, you can come into the visitor center, sing us one of our songs, and here's a coupon for something. Loop it right back. So.
I thought you were going to say, come meet the DJs and come in
there
and
you go.
meet the staff now that you know them.
There is also a suite of banner ads that go along with this placement, so we'll get some of the click-through data on it as well. So we'll dig into those metrics as we do our reporting on the campaign end. You're welcome. Some of the other things that I wanted to mention just on the summer pay campaign, while it's technically spring, we mentioned it in the TDO update, but Graphies is an international publisher of books and awards on graphic design communication. They are committed to presenting and promoting the work of exceptional global design and global talent in design, advertising, photography, and art and illustration. Our spring spot has been awarded a gold Graphies and will be featured in their Graphies 2022 Design Annual Book as one of the best examples of marketing, design, and thinking in the world. Fellow platinum and gold winners include FX Network, DC Comics, Fox Broadcasting, PepsiCo, KitchenAid, NBC Sports, Samsung, HBO Max, and more. So it just is one of those things that our ads and our brand is now also going out to other professionals, agencies, and being showcased and recognized globally, not just for who we are as a destination, but how we're talking about ourselves as a destination. So it was a great honor, and I just wanted to be sure I mentioned it as an update, even though it was from the spring. So next slide, please. All right, so our summer earned media highlights. So we've had 36 placements this summer, spring and summer. Some of those notable placements include USA Today. We've had multiple pickups in Travel and Leisure, Parade Magazine. The Zoo was featured in People Magazine. So some great, strong brand affiliation for us. That had a potential reach of 538 million people and an earned media value of 560,000. So what that means is if I were to have paid for that coverage, that's approximately what I would have had to pay. And instead, we received that based on telling amazing stories. And it was everything from bioluminescence to Cocoa Beach to the painting Cockatoo, thank you. And a feature on Canaveral National Seashore. So a wide variety of topics that have been covered this summer. All right, and then the things that we own, our website, our email, our social media, we're constantly watching website engagement, but one of the things that I try to look at as an indicator of brand awareness is what is happening to our web traffic in those markets that we're spending this money in, right? Are we uplifting our web traffic from new users, people who have not been on our site, in those markets? And this currently, we're running 79% increase year over year of new users from our target market, and that's also up from 2019, albeit not quite as much, but given everything that's happened. So we use it, again, as an indicator of, are we reaching those new people in those target markets, and are they coming to the site to then do the things that we want them to do that indicate travel? So the next metric up there is those goal conversions. Are they signing up for a vacation planner, signing up for email, searching for lodging, spending multiple page views on a website? And right now for the summer, we're looking at almost 48,000 of those, and that is a 25% increase month over month from when we started the campaign. So not only are we driving that new traffic in those target markets, but they are coming to the website and we are watching them do those things that we know indicate an interest in traveling here. The email engagement that's up there, we've been doing a lot of work in the last 6 months to really clean up our email list. Email marketing really is becoming more and more personalized. So we're spending time doing some A/B testing, doing some specific segmenting to see what are people who are on our email list really interested in, instead of just blasting them all with the same message over and over again, right? And we're finding that we have these pockets of people who are really interested in the space stuff, who are really interested in like all of the things you can do from road trips to long weekends, and really starting to refine those messages and cleaning up those who are inactive or finding ways to re-engage them. So what that has done has increased our open rate and our click-through rates from last year. Some, right now, they're averaging about 12.5%. We've had a couple of emails that have been into the 30%, which are numbers we had not seen before. So this method of really taking the time to learn about who those people are, and then customize and tailor that message to them are driving them to open those emails and, again, come through to the website, which, is what we ultimately want. And then social media engagement for the summer. We're looking at right now about 5 million impressions and 2.7 interactions. The difference there, an impression is anytime our brand enters the screen, and an interaction is anytime they do something with that view. So whether it's they start a video, they comment on a post, they share it with their followers. And right now, across our total platforms, we're at about 330,000 total followers. For the summer, that's about 2,100 new followers. And the one thing I just want to say is we take a very multi-pronged approach in reaching people where they are. So we're on multiple social media programs, and we reach them in multiple ways, right? We reach them both organically, the things that we post through advertising, but we also know that we work with influencers and media who then are also spreading the name of our brand. So we are able to reach people who are using these platforms multiple times a day, whether they follow us or not, which is why we take that multi-pronged approach. So so far the summer has been really strong in engaging people, driving them to our website, and getting them to convert. One last one. We've also been very busy, which has been really nice, in our travel trade industry. So earlier this summer, we hosted a group of Orlando cruise planners. One of the reasons we like to host agents in market is because the best way to sell it is to have them experience it. And if they experience it, they're so enthusiastic about talking about what type of experience they had here with their clients. And so we spend a lot of time showing them around, showing them this is the type of experience your customer can have before they embark on their cruise. So it was great to see some folks actually here in market. We did also exhibit at Cruise 360 last month, which was down in South Florida. 3 hotels went with us, and then we had about 1,000 agents who registered that we have since done follow-ups with. We have also, right now the port is not traveling, so we have been sending messages from the port to the agents as well, so serving kind of as that conduit when we have the ability to pass along their message. And then one thing that's been really an interesting development that's come out of this kind of COVID time period is that we've been able to do a lot of virtual agent training and presentations. So we've been able to connect with agents in Canada, Brazil, and all across the United States that maybe we wouldn't have been able to do before, and develop some virtual training seminars to really educate those agents on the Space Coast and the commissions available to them if they're booking packages for their customers here on the Space Coast. So it's been a very active summer in the industry world as well. So those were kind of my highlights. And then, like I said, in the next month or two, we'll do full summer recap. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments, feedback.
I just wanted to add on the travel agent piece, that was the first trade show that we've actually traveled to
Yes.
This year, and you know, an incredibly enthusiastic and well-attended show, and a very enthusiastic reception from the agents. There, you know, everybody's kind of clamoring to get back to travel, so they were chomping at the bit to talk with us, and now we have another 1,000 or so in our database. So we're beginning to build a pretty good travel agent database. And for those of you that think the travel agent world is dead, it really is not. It's morphed. You see, what you're seeing is a lot more people that are affiliated with a large consortium, but they're working maybe from home. So they're working differently. There's not as many storefronts, if you will, but there's just as many agents, and they're still generating a huge amount of travel revenue. And of course, they are commissioned, so there is a good business model for them if they know what they're doing, and then they can set their business up in a positive way. And then there's larger agencies like AAA that we continue to work with and will continue to work with. So the agent world it's certainly in the U.S. it's still going pretty strong. Internationally, there are not as many agencies, but there's travel partners over there like TUI, which is going to be coming here next year with direct service. So you see a lot more of the sort of the buyers of travel that are packaging it, and then we're working with them. So I think there's a lot of work that's still left to be done in this space. And I think internationally, you'll see we'll probably come back in the next couple of months. We're going to look at doing an RFP for representation over in the UK and Europe. I think that as those markets begin to open up next year, I think there's a huge opportunity for smaller destinations like ourselves to squeeze ourselves in there. And we're going to have the direct service, so I think those flights are going to really give us some big opportunity in the UK particularly.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And I can save this for board reports if you want, but I'm just wondering, have we looked from a marketing perspective at advertising at some of these small airports that have low traffic but exceedingly affluent folks that are coming through them? Like, let's say, Bar Harbor or even Orlando Executive, not the smaller Orlando Melbourne Airport or Sanford Orlando, whatever they're calling themselves these days, but the ones that really cater to private planes as opposed to more general commercial aviation. Because I can't help but think that you might be able to get smaller numbers but very high spenders coming out as a result.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting strategy. We have advertised in the past at Sanford, but they have a lot of larger, craft coming through there. Obviously, OIA is where we're spending the most on any kind of air travel type of messaging. But yeah, it could be an interesting strategy to look at maybe like a network of smaller airports. It's something we could take a look at. One of the things that I think Charity talked a little bit about fall. As we get into fall, I want to, speaking of larger spending, I want to try to move up our target audience to some degree. So right now, I think our target's something like 75,000 plus, but I think we want to start moving to the higher end, because I think we've been very dependent as a destination on the drive-in traffic this last year and a half, 2 years, and rightfully so, that's where people are coming from. But I think that the more you can get people to fly here, the longer they're going to stay, the more they're going to spend, and whether they're flying commercial or they're flying private, I think that all fits into that kind of strategy. So it's certainly something to look at.
I appreciate it.
Great. I think that concludes the marketing report. Next, we have capital facilities. In Giles' absence, I know you're on the phone, but you weren't at the meeting, so you want me to recap the facilities meeting, Giles? Sounds like
Sure, that'd be fine, Tom. Go right ahead.
So we met, we reviewed the rankings for the 2 applications that we had for this cycle, which were $1 million for Laurie Wilson Park, kind of continue ongoing improvement that we reviewed previously, and then we reviewed the rankings at the last meetings and the findings, as well as the application from the Valiant Air Command for their hangar event center project up in Titusville. I'm trying to find the scoring.
69.
Page 69, I'm on the wrong end of this thing. Generally speaking, we took Laurie Wilson Park first. Good discussion ensued about what we've done there and what we still intend to do. Went over the scoring. The score total there was 626 with an average score of 78 and a trimmed mean, taking away the lowest and the highest score of 79. Met the minimum threshold of 75 as put out, as stated in our policy, and we voted unanimously to support that project. Subsequently, we discussed the application from the Valiant Warbird Air Museum for their expansion for a hangar/event center. I think that I can sort of safely say that there was general consensus among the board members on the Capital Facilities Committee that while a great facility, we're all supporters of what they do up there and the entertainment value that they bring to both residents and the visiting public. We didn't see generally that they met the required thresholds for return on investment of TDC funds based on visiting public for their proposed project. The scoring reflects that sentiment generally with a total score of 479, average score of just shy of 60 with a trim mean of 58.7. The board voted unanimously to thank them for their application, but to not support it. And that pretty much wrapped up what we discussed at that meeting. It now comes to the TDC for discussion here. Those 2, one motion to support Laurie Wilson and our second vote to not support the request for the Valiant Air Command. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, a couple thoughts briefly here. First, with Laurie Wilson, obviously it's core to both the tourism industry and it's in the dead center of my district. Obviously, I support that. I'd be crazy not to. With respect to the Warbird Museum, though, I'm just curious if any thought was given toward awarding them a lesser amount as opposed to nothing at all. Because I would be comfortable if they're not showing the metrics to justify a full grant, giving them something that is perhaps justified.
So we did discuss it as a committee, and I think everybody said their piece. My piece to that was we've worked hard over these last few years on these policies, and while I say it, and I will say it again, this is an advisory board. We have policies. We advise the county commission, and they can take our advice or they can tell us to do something else with it. The policy does, we do, impartial, independent scoring, as you can see on, well, we didn't include the sheets here, but it's public information as well as also included here in the Cultural Grants Committee in order to give everybody a fair shake based on the criteria. And obviously it's voting. Everybody's going to have different opinions. but they fell way below the policy threshold. My 2 cents was that they're below the policy threshold. I didn't see the return on investment, so personally didn't recommend that they receive some lower amount, and I think that sentiment was generally voiced by the other members of the committee.
I appreciate the info.
Any other questions or discussion? Julie?
Just as I'm learning, what happens to the money? Does it get rolled over for future grants?
Well, it's a good question because we have to keep in mind, and Peter does a really good job with Jeff of reminding us that this is not an unending bucket of money. You know, our directive, both based on our policy and directive by the county commission, is to, for all of these pots of money, is A, know how much is in it, 2, budget forward as to how much we may have in the future, and 3, spend that money judiciously based on the criteria set forth, which is primarily promotion of tourism. Specifically to your question, because we don't grant, there was barely $2 million in reserves. Had we granted this Valiant Air Command request at the full $2 million, then that would have wiped out those reserves. And I believe there's general county policies that, you know, we have rainy day fund and beach and marketing and these other things. We see it on our budgets all the time. So we're essentially sitting on, I hate to quote numbers without looking at it,
Yeah,
but we have about $2 million.
There's $2 million in reserve, and then this, we had a little less than $2 million available to be granted, but what would have happened next year, depending on the projects that we already have on our list, because there's now, you know, sort of a list of pretty large capital projects that we have to make sure we fund every year going forward now. We wouldn't have had much, maybe $1 million next year. So the $1 million that we didn't use will roll over as carry forward into our 2022/23 budget. If we just, you know, unless there's some other, you know, reason that the TDC comes back and says, let's use it for something.
Yeah.
But right now it's unallocated, so it's going to go right back into that.
And I think it's important to add with all of these, especially this fund, because it has such a long-term potential impact. When we give a cultural grant, it's like a shot in the arm, you know, it's like bottles of Gatorade, you know, here's 10,000, have your cultural thing. And yes, it builds awareness of Brevard County, and we should support cultural organizations and sports events and air shows. This capital facility money, you know, that goes in as seed money to hard capital that, you know, can pay dividends over years, if not decades, should be used judiciously. And just because somebody fills an application out and comes in and asks, doesn't mean that we're being mean or don't respect them or their organization. We really should try to reserve that money for those things that will have the biggest impact over years and years going forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to, if you're okay with it, propose a motion, but I'd like to bifurcate this. My motion dealing with just the first, not the second, which someone else is welcome, and I'm sure they will motion afterward. I'd like to move that we recommend to the BOCC approval of the Lori Wilson application as suggested by the subcommittee.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second for discussion. Mayor?
So I'd just like to say, I think the motion came in a lot quicker, but just wanted to say the Valiant Air Command is an attraction in our community. And I understand what you're saying about saving those funds for capital improvements over a long haul. But they should be really considered on the long haul. It's an attraction. It puts Brevard County on the map, so to speak, when it comes to that type of industry. If you've never visited, you know, it's a destination for veterans. It's a destination for our public, in particular with the air flight industry that has protected this nation so effectively. So I understand the motion, and I am in support of that motion, but I implore this committee, this council, to look at ways that we can support the Valiant Air Command.
And Mr. Chair, just if I may briefly, Mayor, I just want to point out, the reason I'm bifurcating this is I'm probably in a very similar boat to yours with this. I'm not comfortable saying nothing whatsoever to VAC. I am comfortable with the Lori Wilson request. I'm not saying that I'm in the boat of, whole hog, let's do the full amount that's requested if that's something that's not justified based on the criteria, but I don't know that I'm comfortable saying zero either.
Can I just point out, I mean, obviously, I'm not part of it, I haven't seen the application. I think it's the quality application, but I'll point out, Mayor, just, for example, in the cultural grants, the Valley Air Command obviously put in a strong application and were rewarded. I don't think I agree with it, it's a fantastic place. I don't think it's about the institution, I think it's about the application, and other institutions have come back with strong applications and kept our standards high. Because I agree with the chair, if on these particular ones, if we water down and go below our standards, then we lose the faith of the community because they're really large money and they have to hit a certain threshold to do it versus the smaller ones. And so I 100% agree, it's a fantastic place. I've been there, I love going there. But I didn't see this application, but I trust the committee to say this might not have been a good, strong fit application. And that's the merit.
And Mr. Chair, I'm not disputing that at all. And I understand what the hard work that went into establishing these policies. I'm more aligned with the great work that they do and the attraction that they are. Mm-hmm. And for our council to consider those factors, regardless of, I'm in support of the motion. I'm in support of the committee that proposed this. However, at the same time, I'm supportive of that command. I'm supportive of the attraction in Brevard County. So my comments are, we should be able to look beyond the application perhaps, or assist with that application, because it does warrant us looking at the Valley Air Command. So I love the way Commissioner Lober put it, perhaps something in the, whatever that amount is, maybe provide some type of cushion for them or starting point. I don't know what the resolution is, but I do know that they're an attraction, and I am in support of the Lori Wilson Park, and I support that committee.
So do we want to take Lori Wilson Park and finish it, and then we can
Yes,
discuss?
sir.
I can
Yes, sir.
try to
That's
respond
fine.
to your points?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, as to the Lori Wilson, intentionally not including VAC in that, because I think we're going to have some degree of split.
So we have a motion and a second to support Lori Wilson Park for $1 million. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Mayor, to your comments, yes, and I thought I said it, but I'll repeat it. The Valiant Air Command is a stalwart, great cultural organization that has received much support. I can't quantify it now. I've asked Peter to see if he can come up with something, but we didn't bring it because this is a capital grant application, but has received a considerable amount of support by the TDC over the years. They are, in the cultural grants, $25,000 from the recent air show. As long as I've been involved, they've consistently been involved in the special events and cultural grants application process to support the events that happen there over the years. And I would guesstimate that over those many years, it adds up to the many tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus.
I would say it was
dollars.
safe, Mr. Chair, to say hundreds of thousands. And also, I was going to mention, in addition to the grant that they're going to get when we talk about cultural, which is on the docket, also, we just created the major event grant program, and they are planning on having an air show. They're going to be slated to receive probably, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 in that. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to be supported, yes.
Nobody in the capital facilities is in any way saying, to the point that you raised, that the Valiant Air Command isn't an asset to the community in the services they provide and the recognition that they bring to veterans that have served our country and everything else. And I would also add, since you brought it up, that we recently gave 3 times different grants to the Veterans Memorial Center from this TDC that adds up to now close to $2 million.
For the amphitheater.
No, for
There.
that entire facility. They came back to the Capital Facilities Committee 3 different times for 3 different grants. And along the same vein, I'd say, there's marketing, there's beaches, and there's the zoo, and then I think it's Veterans Centers, I think ranks probably highest on receiving grants from this organization based on this pot of money that we have over these many years. The grant specifically, they have a relatively, and it would be great if other TDC members want to look at it, but they have and I'm going to invite the gentlemen that are here today that presented to speak here, so you can hear from them. But they have a multi-phase plan to build out that facility. They recently received a $600,000 FAA grant, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to build out a part of their facility, and want to do a multi-phased approach to enlarge the overall facility. The request itself was this now phase 2, which was just shy of $2 million to build a hangar space that could house vintage planes as well as work as an event center. That's what we were presented. It was a one-phase, $2 million request with no matching funds to build out I believe it was 30,000 square foot hangar space. Justification being that there are corporate partners, space industry related, that occasionally bring events to that area. And in addition to expanding their overall museum style offering, the primary justification was they can host events there. Well, you can really host events at any hotel. You can host events at a litany of other places. So we looked at it and then we obviously talked to Peter and staff, and they brought AirSage data, and how much does this event space, how much tourism, our primary criteria for vetting all of these grant applications across sports and culture and capital grants, how much additional tourism did the committee feel that they not only represented, but then we could also justify based through the evaluation process. And frankly, for a $2 million grant, it didn't pass muster. Not to say that the Valiant Air Command isn't a wonderful organization, that they did great things, but they were asking for $2 million for an event center that probably would have very, very marginal increase. It would provide an event center for people that are here from, SpaceX and Boeing and Northrop and NASA, and, probably people that are coming here anyway. And so that didn't sort of meet the threshold to justify that spending. I hope that's about all I can do to elaborate on that.
Right,
So having
appreciate
said
it. Thank
that,
you.
Those just responses to your comments. If there's, why don't we invite, I'm going to get this right, Norm and Bob from the Valiant Air Command, one or either or both, your choice, and you can elaborate a little bit on your plan. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Brian. Are you able to pull up their application on your computer with some of the graphics that they had for the benefit of the other TDC members?
Sure, I can work on it while I speak.
Matt? I know, that was a test.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank the board and the TDC for all their past support. We certainly have appreciated that, and that's kept the doors open, frankly. I think anyone who's ever been into the museum business knows that foot traffic will not pay the bill. So you're always trying to find ways to bring additional income in. In this particular case, we've been planning for years for this program of expansion that it's going on. One of the things that the museum does provide is an excellent venue for organizational gatherings, from weddings to reunions to veterans meetings to fundraisers. And these events sometimes are staggering the number of people. We've had Honor Flight at 350. We've had SpaceX at over 800. But we consistently have large groups of people using our facility for a venue For one reason only, there's no other facility in North Brevard. There is not another large convention center in North Brevard that can handle the demand of the people. And we've been supporting them over the years and continue to do so. There is a drawback that we've realized, that our facility is only available at a maximum of 7 months a year because of the weather, the Florida climate. Our hangars are not air conditioned, they're not heated, and we don't have enough bathrooms, so we have to bring in portable bathrooms. We also don't have a commercial prep kitchen to handle all these events, so they're always bringing in the wagons and stuff like that, if you will, to help support us. If you're looking at the picture there, the buildings on the right, the large main hangar, the second one is our Vietnam hangar, the third is our motor pool area, and the building to the left with the blue awning is the facility we're talking about. So since our hangars are not heated and air conditioned, they're no good during the winter or the summer. So everyone who wants to hold events has to crowd it into about the same 6 or 7 months. As we've came to a problem with real estate for our airplanes parking on the ramp and in the hangars, we realized our second problem is an adequate facility for all of these meetings and group gatherings. So what we did, instead of, and we finished phase one. Let me back up a little for those of you who haven't seen it. This was multiple phase. Phase one was the architecture and engineering design and getting all the permits and property. That's done. There's just over 6 acres available. You can see the ramp where the airplanes are. That's all been funded. We have the money, it's in escrow right now, to do all of the infrastructure for all 4 phases in the future. And we're starting to get a contract to start building that ramp now. And that'll provide parking, vehicle parking, airplane parking, and access to the museum. That alleviates our ramp parking problem that we have with our airplanes and allows transit aircraft to come to the museum. Instead of just building another steel hangar on this ramp, which we can do, we combined the programs and said what we need to do is build a convention center that can also be used as a hangar, a sorely needed convention center for North Brevard. There it is again. And what we would do in this new joint use hangar, which would have heating, air conditioning, PA system, and a prep kitchen, commercial prep kitchen, we would then move what I call our paper airplanes. These are our World War I or prior to World War II airplanes that are mostly wood and fabric. We would move those airplanes out of our main hangar and move them into this new convention center hangar to be the perfect display at an aviation convention center. In doing so, that frees up hangar space for our aircraft that are so crowded we can move them out and gives us room to bring in new aircraft. So we've solved 2 problems with one effort here. We've provided an all-weather convention center, and we freed up space that we need to have for our airplanes. A third consideration, I mentioned anyone who's worked at museums finding money to support it. Having the convention center there will provide revenue to support the Valiant Air Command, not just in the immediate future, but in the long-term future. Now, you talked about the number of events and people that might come in. I think we submitted an annual report of all of the events that we had, along with a list of 150 vendors that we used in the local area. It will be a continued financial positive impact on North Brevard. These will continue to have these large conventions. And just as I might mention this, the next one coming up is in 3 weeks. It's a group from Miami. They've got over 300 people coming in for a convention in our hotel. It's a fundraiser. And as most of them, they always last till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Very few of the out-of-town visitors go home. They remain here at least one night. So that's another tax impact that would be a source of revenue. So I think if you think it all the way through, having a convention center there that's at the airport for the air travelers, for the car travelers, something that can be used year-round, would free up the space for our expansion and add visible economic impact to North Brevard and continue to add some additional taxes. I think it's a win-win situation, and that's why we proposed this. We didn't necessarily ask for the $2 million. That was the total price of the package. We would love to have any support or portion of that that we could get to help make this center a viable thing in the near future. Well, last comment I'll make is, we're not the only ones that noticed that there's no large convention center in North Brevard. The hotels know it, the travel agents know it. We get calls from all around the U.S. about the size. So I would say if we don't build it, some private enterprise is going to build it within the next 2 years. And that's going to be very bad for the museum. We'll lose all of our events to the private, and we'll need more funding just to survive. And that's kind of the way we looked at the whole picture. Questions?
Just a couple thoughts.
Yes, sir.
First, just to keep Christy happy over there, Norm had passed out a packet that has some docs regarding this particular agenda item. I see it's made its way around clockwise to Julie now. So just at the end, if we can make sure that they're included in the minutes, I think that'll keep everyone happy.
Certainly.
The other thought, and I had mentioned earlier that if the VAC doesn't fit for the requested amount or the total amount that was being contemplated, that we could look at a lesser amount. The other thing, just in sitting here thinking about this as the presentation's been going, as to the concern raised by our chair that they didn't have any matching funds, there's nothing of which I'm aware that would serve to prohibit our awarding some amount up to what they've requested, but not necessarily at that level, that's contingent on their obtaining matching funds by a certain date. So we could say the trigger for them receiving this is they've got to raise an equal amount or some percentage, either higher or lower than 100% of whatever it is we offer them. But I'm trying to throw out a couple ideas so that it's not simply a no, because I do agree with the mayor. This is one of those things where obviously we have to find that a primary purpose is in generating tourism or in furthering the tourism industry. But to the degree that we can do that and also support an organization that's purely a benefit to the local community, I would like to do that. And it's not that I'm willing to bend the rules in order to do that, but if we can help fit this square peg into a round hole to some degree, I'd like to see us make an effort. If we can't, we can't, but I want to throw out there, I'm willing, if someone's more creative than I am in terms of specifically how we do it, I'm open to any ideas.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Is there any funding on your side that's already set aside for, is Phase 3 is where we're at, based on what?
What we've raised so far towards the joint use facility is about $300,000.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing prevents them from coming back next year with a better application, money match, and that stuff. But this is not a one and done, correct?
As with that eternal flame, God bless our police officers and all they do for us, but I struggled with that eternal flame. It was declined the first time around and came around the second year, and lo and behold, received $1 million. Was that correct? $780,000 for an eternal flame at our Titusville Police Museum. That's the answer to your question.
So, I mean, there is a process, which is come back with an application that meets the criteria.
And I appreciate that, and we certainly have thought about that. In our mind, in our planning, time is pretty much of essence. Those who are familiar with North Brevard realize the number of new hotels that have gone up, the number of companies that are moving in. It is actually growing quite rapidly up there. You can't buy a house on the market. And more companies are looking at the area. The people who built the new hotels, I'm sure one or more of them will get together and build a commercial facility that won't benefit the Valiant Air Command, but would actually financially hurt it.
Well,
so we do want to get started.
As a developer in the private market, one of the things that really gets me is when government comes in and competes with private enterprise. If we can save tax dollars, which these are, we're here representing the tax collection that is arguably taken from hotel guests only, which is another issue. It would be great if a private enterprise could come in there and build a convention center and not ask for $2 million set aside like our friends at Driftwood and Cocoa Beach are doing to build their convention center. My only thoughts on that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed by Robert's rules to make any motions, but I'm not going to make any motion. You're looking at me like you wanted me to say something, so I'm going to say it. We're an advisory board. The advisory board to this board said it didn't pass muster. This advisory board can make a recommendation to the council, and they can do with it what they wish. Valiant Air Command is a great center, but you know, they have spent money on other phases. This is a multi-phase project, a many-year development plan that they have. I think it's great. I hope they find the money to do it. This organization and this pot of tax dollars isn't the only source out there for building museums and hangars at, you know, airports, which are, you know, nonprofit owned. If there's a motion that passes here with a majority vote to give them some money toward their efforts, then so be it. It's happened before and will happen again, irrespective of what the recommendation was from the subcommittee.
I'll make a motion.
That's all I'll say.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings as written regarding the VAC Warbird Air Museum.
Am I allowed to second?
Yeah, I'll second.
You want to elaborate what you mean?
Accepting the findings as written is what we have here on the sheet, what their score is. Their total score 479, average score 59.9, which the minimum score to qualify was 70, correct?
75.
75, correct, and they did not meet that. So that's my motion, is to to accept the findings as written. We have a second by Mr. Winston.
We just, Mr. Chair, we voted on approving Laurie Wilson Park. I don't understand the motion.
This is only on the Warbird.
Just as Mrs. Young, was my understanding, she's making a motion to accept the subcommittee's recommendation to not grant, in this cycle, the Warbird Museum funds. That is the motion that I believe she just made.
Yes. Laurie Wilson was separate. We did that one already, right?
Yes.
And that one's done. So this is the Warbird.
My understanding is we just voted on.
No, we voted on Laurie,
approving-
on Laurie
approving
Wilson
Laurie
Park.
Wilson, so they didn't qualify for that,
I'm
for
sorry?
those funds, correct? So no motion is necessary, is
No
it?
motion is necessary
Yeah.
because only
Oh.
Laurie Wilson was forwarded with a recommendation.
I believe a point of order, and I'll look over to Christie,
Yeah.
but it was requested when that motion was made that the two be bifurcated.
Yes,
So therefore, the two do have to be voted on independently.
Or
Yeah.
simply no recommendation being made.
Mr. Chair, just, and again, people can do what they wish with this. I'm just making a suggestion. It truly is not intended to coerce anyone one way or the other. I would prefer, I know it's strange coming from me, to be a little bit more diplomatic and cordial with this, and perhaps just not take any action on it if it's clear that a majority of the TDC is not in favor of awarding any amount. I just think it's nicer, rather than slapping someone on the wrist, just letting it go at this point. And if they come back next year, then they come back next year.
Yeah, I would never want it, we have to, that's a great idea, but I want to reiterate that we're all supportive of the Valiant Air Command. This is specific to their $2 million request. So if that is the pleasure of the board to not make a motion and do anything, then the matter's concluded.
They just rescind the motion? Okay. I rescind the
Motion rescinded. Motion
Thank you, I appreciate
rescinded.
it.
Thank you. Anybody's, I'm just sitting on this side of the table. Anybody's welcome to make motions and we can have votes. Okay. Moving on to the Beach Improvement Committee report.
I have
Julie.
no report. Our next meeting is October 13th.
That's my favorite kind of report.
And me too.
Thank you. Next, put Keith to the test. Sports Committee report.
We did have a meeting, and two items of interest. The first, I just want the committee to be aware that we have one organization, the Flag Football Association, that has consistently failed to meet the requirements of their grants in terms of reporting across the board. And so at this point, we're not funding any of the grants because they haven't met the minimum requirements in terms of that. I just think it's important to know no action is necessary, but just so you're aware. And it's very consistent over multiple grants, really no communications, none of the required actions. Did I capture that correctly, Peter?
Yes, sir. In fact, they are technically in breach of contract, so even if this board voted, it would be very legally difficult for us to make any payouts because they haven't lived up to their contractual obligations at this point.
Yeah, so just so you're aware, and it's consistent over many things in case you get questions from the community. And the second is that we move forward on a new grant program in terms of recommendation approval of those guidelines, which is for a more aggressive sort of sports activity piece for sort of either first time or not presently happening in Brevard County programs that would allow TDC staff to recruit some of these larger programs that can bring bigger impact. So this is a new program, it's budgeted, and these are the guidelines, and we recommend moving forward with the guidelines.
They start on page 71, and then we would need a vote on that, please.
Yep. So you want to take us over the highlights, or, $50,000?
Yeah, $50,000. What's really key to this one is that it's new to Brevard County. This is about attracting new business to Brevard County. It's important to maintain certain sports activities here that come year after year, and we don't want to lose them. But this gives a bigger chunk of money to bring them in for the first time, and I think that's really the highlights. It has, I think, some very sort of strict requirements in terms of tracking impact. It gives the recipients some flexibility in how they do it, but they absolutely have to document it. Going back to our earlier discussion a minute ago, does it bring tourists into Brevard County, which is the primary piece? And so it allows for that, I think, and that's on page 75. In the middle of the page, the event organizer has a responsibility to document each room night related to its event using the attached lodging room night report. Alternatively, if the organizer is using a specified hotel or room block, regardless, all of those numbers must be verified. And it goes on a couple of times. I think those are the highlights. And then if total room nights or other estimated are less than 100% of projections, the final grant amount will be proportional. So it holds the people putting on the events, I think, to a high level of responsibility. That is what we should be aspiring towards.
And it's a refund mechanism?
Yeah.
Like the other ones?
And primarily towards marketing dollars, right, Peter? That's
40% towards marketing?
Yeah.
Any questions about, no, you still got the gavel.
I'm sorry. I'm
Do we
happy
need to make
answer
a-
any questions, but I'm going to kick them to Peter. He's going to know it in more details than I do.
Just for clarification, the organization has to pay for it, submit it for refund. That's what you mean by
Correct.
Okay.
It's our typical grant process.
Okay,
It's a
just wanted to make sure.
reimbursement.
Reimbursement.
I like it if you want to consider that a motion.
Yeah, I'll second his, I like it.
We have a motion and a second for this new sports event funding policy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much, Keith. Does that conclude your report?
That concludes my report.
That concludes
Chairman.
your report. Doesn't seem fair that we keep these order the same time all the time, so you have to go last.
Oh, I like
Cultural,
my last. We always
you
save
like?
the best
Okay.
for last, yeah.
Best for last. Cultural Committee, Andrea.
All right, thank you. I am so happy to present this. This just makes my day. First of all, we had two people on our committee that had conflicts, and that was Aaron Collins and also Steve Herron. So I need an approval, if I can get a motion to accept their conflict, their Form 8B. Can I get a motion and a?
They didn't vote on their own organizations.
Right,
They
they did
did
not
not.
score and did not vote.
If I could, we need a little more information on what the conflict
Oh, all right, so Aaron Collins he is associated with the Brevard Ballet Youth Company and the Space Coast Symphony Orchestra, and Steve Herron is associated with the Brevard, make sure I get this straight across here, the Brevard Regional Arts Group, and also the Henniker Center. So they were grant applicants, so of course they did not score and did not vote on giving themselves grants.
I think they're both paid employees / directors of those organizations.
And Steve Herron's with Tiger Soul Playhouse. Right.
Yes. I thought
So
I said that, okay.
If you're looking for basically a motion to acknowledge and to
Yes.
the extent we have to approve their submissions as far as Form 8Bs, you've got the motion?
Yes. That's for motion and a second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
All right, now on for the good part. So if you look at your pullout sheet here, you'll see that of the 19 applicants that we had, 17 of them did qualify. We went through them at the Cultural Committee yesterday. We went through each one individually, scored and motioned and approved each one individually. And you'll see that they did qualify, and for the amount that they asked for, they were granted that amount. But this year, being an exceptional year, we didn't have to give them a haircut and actually give them less money than what they asked for. We were able to give them more money than what they asked for. We had $150,000 for all the grants, to supply all the grants. So giving all of them that qualified the amount of money that they asked for, we only needed $112,500, you'll see on your sheet. So we took the difference and made a proportional adjustment when we took the difference, and all of them were able to get more money than what they asked for. Now, this is still reimbursement grants, so if they don't use all of the additional money, then they don't receive that either. So they're not getting anything extra. They still have to use that money just as the amount that they asked for. So we were...
Amazingly, they will use it all.
Amazingly, yes, yes. So this is absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy to be here today to present this and be able to actually give people what they asked for and even a little bit more. So these are the items here. If anyone wants to discuss any of them, we're here. Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion and a second to approve them as written.
Can you talk to us about this, or is this yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Before we vote, I think it'd be interesting to look at this data before we vote, or?
yeah, I thought it would be important because, you know, if you think back to last year, there was a request from the county commission to really be focused on return on investment. And the way that we establish return on investment is basically we look at how many out-of-county attendees a group has, what that economic impact would be in terms of their visitor spending, and then calculate an ROI amount. So I had Deborah add that to this sheet, which really shows the scores that they got, the trim mean, just like we've talked about in the past, the award as it was originally identified, and then the award as it was uplifted by the committee yesterday. But then you see the next column. After that is the reported attendance outside of Brevard County, and then what the consequent spending would be, and then what that ROI would be. So it really shows that the groups that qualified and then ultimately were scored and met the minimum score criteria did in fact generate tourism and are generating a good ROI based on the amount of money that we would be granting them.
I love, and the AirStage data is specific to those locations. That's year-long AirStage. That's the actual number of out-of-county attendees
Correct.
going to those.
For the year, so that was my
it's
question.
depending on the event or the activity. If it's a specific event, then it looks at those days of the event. If it's a museum's different. It looks at the venue for the entire year.
So the ROI is an apples to apples, because the American Police Hall of Fame gets 30,000 people over a year.
Right, it's over the course of a year, correct.
Right.
But that's what they're applying for. The way their grant is written, it's for the museum to help, you know, bolster the activities in the museum.
Got it.
So that's how we look at it.
So that gives us a real read on how many specific out-of-towners are coming, how many tourists are coming to that institution for the either event or for the whole institution's year.
Is Brevard Nature Alliance one event, or is that
Yeah.
year-long?
It's one event.
And you had to look, but you didn't look at, in this case, because of COVID, how many years did you go back?
We looked at 19, these are 19.
These are 19
Yeah,
numbers.
this is the last year where an event or activity was held.
Okay.
And then for the museums, it was 19 because 20, we just
Yeah,
don't,
couldn't-
we write 20 off.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is great data. It'd be good to have one more column, just to note if it was event-based or annual or something like that, just so that we know these are oranges and these are apples.
Yes, sir, we'll let it.
But otherwise, 20 years we've been looking for something like this. We
Yes, I was
finally got
about
it.
to say, It's really exciting
It
data.
only took a generation.
Thank you very much for putting the ROI on there for this sheet. This is going to make it much better when we stand before, when there's trembling in front of the county commission,
That was my thought, yes.
when they actually can see it there written. So if we can get a motion in a second to approve this, please.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lober and
We have a motion from Ms. Braga and a second from Commissioner Lober. Did I get that in reverse? Yep, in reverse. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
thank you. And our next meeting is August 24th.
August 24th?
Well, that was just.
Yes, that was
That was yesterday.
I
Next
believe
meeting
the
is-
next meeting is when, Deborah? October 5th.
October 5th.
Corrected, October 5th. Thank you.
Excellent. I don't know if this, I was going to take public comment before the reports. Are there anybody in the public that would like to make a comment? No? Commissioner Lober.
Figured this is an appropriate body to make this sort of a report to. Believe it or not, I actually took my first vacation outside of Central Florida in over 2 years this past week. Went up to Bar Harbor, spent way more money than I should have.
Nice.
Kind of double dipped. I had a friend of mine who I've known just shy of 20 years who was getting married in New York. Stayed in Staten Island for his wedding for a couple days. I'm in a good mood. That's all I've got.
Good for you. Good for
Well,
you.
it's great to have you in a good mood, Commissioner Lober.
Mayor
Nothing to
Medina.
report.
Nothing? Thank you. Keith?
Well, if the commissioner's in a good mood, I just want to say, heading the Sports Commission, back in July, my oldest daughter was on the team that won the Women's National Tackle Football Alliance Championship in Canton. Yeah, it's full tackle. They won it for the 6th time, 3 in a row, and her autograph is now on a football in Canton in the Hall of Fame.
Congratulations.
So
Wow.
I'm proud to head the Sports Commission with a daughter as athletic as that, and you don't want to meet her in a dark alley. That's all I can say.
Congratulations.
And they
That's-
flew on the Patriots plane, and it was pretty exciting, so,
That's something else.
yep.
Julie?
I'm in a good mood, but I don't have anything to
Oh, that's great. You're always in a good mood. That's why we like you so much. Giles, do you have anything to report?
No report today, thanks.
Thank you. Andrea?
No report.
No report. No report. Hospitalities, well, I'll just say hospitality looks like we're in the slow season, but once we get past this Delta wave and hopefully the governor relents on his mask and vaccination mandates for cruising specifically, then schools will be better off. I did hear on local news this morning that at the end of the year, we're going to have 11 home-ported ships in Port Canaveral, which was news to me, because the most we've had in the past, I believe, was 7 home-ported ships. So, and I stay on top of the cruise activity up there at the port, obviously. So 11 home-ported ships. So if we can get beyond the current event, I think we're going to see a lot more demand generally here in Brevard County. Thank you, everybody, for attending our meeting. We're adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any